The ICU doors slammed open hard enough to rattle the glass, and for one sharp second, the unit's steady hum became a vacuum where every sound felt too exposed. A gurney surged in, wheels screaming against the polished floor, pushed by an ER physician whose gloves were already dark with blood. Two security guards crowded the rails like they were escorting danger, instead of an injured man. Behind them, a hospital administrator in a suit moved with stiff panic, breathing through his mouth as if he could not get enough air. On the bed lay a broad-shouldered patient whose strength still showed through the blankets. Skin turned a gray shade that meant volume loss and time running out. One arm was wrapped in field dressings that were already failing, red soaking through in spreading stains that looked almost calm in their certainty. His jaw was clenched so hard a muscle ticked near his temple. His eyes were open, focused, furious, disciplined. People at the nurses' station whispered one word as if it carried weight: SEAL. Then another: commander. The charge nurse began to speak, but the wounded man's gaze cut through the room, and instinctively everyone stepped back as if he owned the air. And then the new nurse stepped forward, not louder than anyone, not faster, not dramatic, just certain. She glanced once at the monitors, once at the dressing, and quietly asked for something nobody else had prepared. The room hesitated. The commander's stare shifted to her, measuring her, irritated that she did not flinch. She did not introduce herself. She did not explain. She simply took control of the moment like she had done it before, and in the minutes that followed, everyone who dismissed her would begin to understand they were wrong. The night shift had its own weather, not loud, not theatrical, just constant pressure that settled on the chest and refused to lift. And Erin Cole walked into it at 18, 57, with a new badge clipped to her scrubs and an old stillness in her posture that did not belong to a first week. Her hair was tied back tight enough to deny anyone a grip. Nothing dangled, nothing flashed. Her pockets were arranged for function, not comfort. Penlight, shears, wipes, a folded sheet of paper she never unfolded in front of anyone. The charge nurse, Myra Holt, looked up just long enough to assign her two stable patients in beds 7 and 8, her tone not unkind but final. The way people spoke when they decided you were background. Erin accepted the handoff sheet, scanned it fast, and asked one question that made Mara blink: any airway concerns, then moved without argument, her shoes almost silent. Her eyes performing the same methodical sweep in each room. Patient first, then lines, then monitor, then pumps, then wall suction. Then the small details that became disasters at 3 in the morning. In bed 7, she noticed an arterial line dressing lifting at a corner and replaced it cleanly, not because it was urgent, but because she could feel the future tug of a restless patient and the hemorrhage that could follow. When she stepped back into the hallway, she listened to the unit's soundscape and heard a tension under it, an unnatural note, and she found its source in the crash of double doors and the gurney racing. Drew Kincaid arrived in a wave of fear that was not only medical. The ER doctor barked orders, demanded bed 3 cleared, reported a gunshot wound with vascular involvement, and a field tourniquet already nearing the edge of safe time. Kincaid refused pain medication. He was difficult, which in hospital language meant he did not surrender to the system. A junior nurse tried to slide a blood pressure cuff onto his uninjured arm, and Kincaid stopped it with 2 fingers, firm and controlled, freezing the nurse mid-motion. One security guard reached in on instinct to grab the patient's hand, and Erin moved, not toward Kincaid first, but toward the guard, stepping into the lane, occupying it like a door closing. And she told him calmly not to grab the patient because he would escalate him and contaminate what they had not even made sterile yet. The guard hesitated, confused by the precision and the lack of volume. Erin asked the ER doctor tourniquet time, demanded blood, demanded vascular readiness. And when an administrator tried to insert himself with the word protocols, Erin answered without heat that protocols did not stop hemorrhage. In bed 3, as the team transferred Kincaid and chaos threatened to become mistakes, someone reached for the tourniquet buckle to loosen it out of misplaced urgency. And Erin caught the nurse's wrist with a precise stop, not rough, not punishing, and told her no removal without surgical control because you could bleed him out in less than a minute. She cut back the dressing in layers, slow enough to preserve clotting, fast enough to see the truth, placed pressure exactly where it mattered, not where it looked busy, and told respiratory to prepare for intubation, but not to sedate unless forced, and the ER doctor nodded with reluctant respect. Mara asked who trained her, and Aaron answered hospitals, which was true in the narrowest possible way, and Kincaid, pale and furious, watched her hands and the economy of her movement the way a man watched for competency when his life depended on it. Outside the room, the administrator murmured into his phone with urgent secrecy, and Aaron caught fragments. "He's here, he's awake, I see you," and something settled into place inside her, cold and heavy. Because this was not only about a patient. It was about access, control, and someone ensuring the commander did not leave the building alive or free. The vascular surgeon arrived, and the unit tried to return to rhythm. But the rhythm was an illusion, and Aaron took the long route back to her assigned beds. Not because she was lost, but because she understood buildings the way some people understood weather. And on that route, she saw a man by the sanitizer dispenser wearing a visitor badge too clean and too centered, watching the nurses station instead of any patient room. His badge read Michael Sanders, but it lacked the unit's time stamp and admitting print style, and Aaron passed him without changing pace, counted his hands, registered the set of his shoulders and his comfort with personal space, and stored him without confronting him, because confrontation created noise and noise created predictability for the wrong side. "In bed 8, Ms." Alvarez trembled with septic weakness and asked Aaron if she was dying, and Aaron answered with grounded truth, very sick. But responding, and while she adjusted lines, she saw a clear plastic syringe cap on the floor that did not belong there, new and clean as if freshly removed. And when she checked the pump history, she found a brief pause 15 minutes ago with no charted note. She stepped into the hallway and felt a set of footsteps pass that did not sound like staff or drifting family, and when she looked down the hall, the too clean badge man was gone. She brought the facts to Mara without drama. Pump paused, no note, syringe cap. Asked for med access tightened and badges checked and security placed at ICU doors. And Mara dismissed it as paranoia until the unit phone rang and Mara took a call from someone claiming federal agency affiliation, asking for an update on bed 3, already knowing the room number. Mara's face changed by degrees as she realized they were being watched from inside their own systems. A security guard reported a man trying to access the service elevator with a visitor badge and getting aggressive when asked for ID. And Aaron's mental map snapped into sharper relief: radiology corridors, service elevators, stairwells bypassing public checkpoints, while 2 new visitors, a man and a woman, appeared at the ICU glass with a clipboard too clean, their attention on the unit rather than any patient, and the woman raised her hand to the keypad like she expected compliance. Aaron told Mara quietly that they were here, and as if on cue, an alarm in bed 3 shifted tone, sharp, urgent, because timing was part of the strategy. Aaron asked Mara to lock the unit down without announcing it, because the threat they faced was not loud violence but a quiet, coordinated attempt to reach Kincaid through routine. Doors, paperwork, medication access, and the human instinct to obey anyone who looked official. The lockdown began as institutional theater, calls to facilities, security placement orders, moving staff like a busy unit instead of a threatened one. But Aaron prepared for interruption. Gathering tape, shears, occlusive dressings, IV supplies, saline, not because she wanted a fight, but because she expected access to fail at the worst moment. At the glass doors, a young guard spoke to the clipboard woman and her partner and nodded, then typed the code and unlocked the ICU. And Aaron crossed the station fast enough to get there before the door moved, holding the handle from inside with controlled force, telling the guard through glass not to open it. And when he mouthed that they were federal, Aaron shook her head once and looked directly at the clipboard woman, who produced a badge too quickly to read, a flash meant to trigger obedience. Aaron watched the partner's hands drift low near his belt line and told Mara not to lean in, demanded ID verification, and the woman threatened escalation and court orders. As if courts operated in 5-minute windows, and while the front door pressure built. Aaron saw the staff-only service door deeper and the unit shift, slightly, as someone tested it with careful patience. She didn't react openly, because showing concern revealed what mattered. but she told Mara service corridor, and Mara's face drained as she radioed security. And Aaron sent Josh to bed 3 to warn Vascular of an access issue, because if they could not take Kincaid with paperwork and smiles, they would take him in the confusion of a medical crisis, using the ICU's instinct to save a life as cover to end one. Aaron called the internal emergency line and initiated silent lockdown protocol for critical care, refused to waste time proving her job title to an operator. And then, when she heard a soft metallic click, the sound of a latch giving without force, she turned away from the glass doors for the first time and walked toward the service corridor with a linen tote like she belonged there. Because the threat was inside the unit now, and the first confrontation would happen where chaos was lethal, between sick beds and oxygen lines, and people who trusted the building to protect them. The corridor smelled like bleach and cardboard, and at the end the staff-only door stood ajar by half an inch, wrong for a self-closing hospital door, and Aaron stopped 3 steps short. Set the tote down as if forgotten, and listened to movement on the other side that avoided sound. Then called out facilities in a plausible tone and got back a male voice claiming we're handling it. Wrong cadence, wrong entitlement. When the door opened a fraction, and a man with an earpiece and half-hidden visitor badge stepped into view and told her to go back to her station, Aaron gave him calm instead of fear. And when he reached to push her aside, Aaron shifted 1 inch into his reach, pressed her penlight into the nerve hollow above his collarbone with precise pressure, and his hand weakened involuntarily. Surprise sharpening into anger, because a nurse had found the point without searching. Aaron pivoted with his momentum and pinned him into the wall, not slamming his head, just blocking the doorway with his body, and when he reached for his radio, she took trauma shears and cut his earpiece wire at the collar with a single snip, severing command without spectacle. Behind him she saw a second figure, female, dark clothing, ponytail, carrying a long bag disguised as medical equipment, and a third shadow near the stairwell. And Aaron understood this was not intimidation, but a rehearsed operation with redundancy. She pulled the silent security alarm station, no siren, just system response, and when the third intruder lunged to slip around the pinned man toward the ICU, Aaron stepped into the center line and became a human gate, redirecting an elbow into a supply cage door with metal clanging loud enough to draw attention. Because sometimes noise was protection when it forced witnesses to look. Something small and dark flashed in the intruder's hand, and Aaron did not wait to identify it. She grabbed the saline bag and slapped it into his wrist, making the object drop and clatter to the floor. A pre-filled syringe with clear fluid, a quiet weapon designed for a hospital. Her stomach went cold, because this was how you killed without guns under the cover of care. Footsteps approached down the corridor, and the intruders withdrew in controlled retreat, scooping up the syringe and leaving nothing, because they did not want a fight, they wanted a clean outcome. And Aaron didn't chase, because chasing created blind corners and ambush. She bagged the syringe wrapper as evidence, wrote the time with a steady hand, and returned to the unit where Mara stood pale with blood-streaked gloves, reporting a sudden drop in Kincaid's vitals. And Aaron held up the specimen bag and said out loud what the unit did not want to face. Someone tried to bring a non-pharmacy syringe into the ICU quietly. Outside the glass doors, the clipboard woman and partner were still there, no longer smiling, repositioned out of camera line, adapting. While Mara reported the administrator was coming to manage the liaison, and Aaron said flatly that he was feeding them, and Mara called it a serious accusation. And Aaron answered that it required a serious response. Aaron taped Ms. Alvarez's IV line in a way that made tampering obvious, because the moral weight of this crisis was that the intruders would use innocence as leverage and distraction. And Aaron could not protect one high-value patient by sacrificing the rest. Then the administrator, Paul Danner, arrived at the ICU doors with his suit still buttoned wrong, and his phone lifted like a badge. And the federal woman straightened, as if the door had already opened. Mara met Danner before the keypad and told him to stop, and he claimed he had it handled, and Mara said he did not, placing her body between him and the access point, refusing space without touching him, while the clipboard woman insisted they only needed access to secure bed 3 and spoke the word, federal like it was a magic key. Aaron, positioned at the edge of the station, dialed hospital counsel and demanded verification and real law enforcement without waiting for procedure to dull urgency. Because she understood that the system's first reflex was always to ask who you were rather than what was happening. Aaron showed Danner the specimen bag and told him she stopped someone from bringing a syringe into the unit. And Danner tried to dismiss it until the plastic and the handwritten time forced the idea into his mind. And outside, the clipboard woman's patience cracked and her partner's hand drifted low again. And Aaron read the moment. Danner was the weak point because he wanted complexity to end. When Aaron told the young guard inside the unit to lock the inner bolts and step away from the keypad, he hesitated, caught between administration and nursing. And Aaron said quietly that if he opened the door, he would be the first one they used, and his face drained as he complied and the metal bolt clicked. The clipboard woman placed her clipboard on the floor like a signal, both hands visible, and her partner stepped out of camera line, and Aaron felt the shift from paper authority to operational force. Not loud assault, but coordinated distraction. Aaron heard the soft scrape at the service corridor again, another attempt at quiet entry, and she told Mara that they could stop it, but it would cost, because every move risked patience. Aaron walked to the staff-only door, stopped 3 steps short, and taped the seam with silk tape as a simple tripwire, then waited, and when the tape trembled and tore as the door eased open. Aaron pressed her palm flat and closed it firmly, bracing her body weight and speaking through the door with calm menace in restraint. "Stop, you do not want this loud." A man's voice on the other side told her she was in the way again, and Aaron answered that she would stay until security arrived because it helped the patients, not her. And when he shoved the door, Aaron absorbed it and adjusted her stance to reduce leverage rather than escalating to violence. She spoke into the silence that if he came through, he would step into cameras and locked corridors and only hurt someone uninvolved. And then heavy footsteps thundered behind her, real security responding to the system prompt, and Aaron held until they arrived, then directed them not to strike, to cuff, to control. Because uncontrolled force in a hospital corridor would turn the unit into chaos, and chaos was the intruder's oxygen. The intruder staggered back with a small case that could have passed as a medical kit, because the entire plan was to look like care while delivering harm. And as he was restrained, he told Aaron she didn't know what Kincaid had done, and Aaron answered flatly that she knew what they came to do. And then she returned to the front doors where Danner's hands shook over the keypad, Mara blocking him with trembling refusal. And Aaron told Danner in a voice only he could hear that if he opened the door he would be responsible when someone died in that hallway, not in a memo. And Danner froze because the weight of real blood finally reached him. Outside, the clipboard woman watched the service corridor security reposition and understood their back door was lost, their timing window closing, and without drama she turned and walked away. Her partner following, disappearing into hospital flow like they had never existed, because professionals did not create scenes when scenes drew attention. The danger did not end with their backs. It ended with the door staying shut and the unit refusing to obey fear. In bed 3, vascular stabilized Kincaid enough for transport to the OR. And as the gurney rolled out under real security, Kincaid's pale face turned and his eyes found Aaron, not gratitude. Not performance, just clear appraisal, and he said hoarsely that she held the line, and Aaron nodded once and answered that so did he, and when he said she was not new. Aaron replied quietly that she was not new to this, and that was all, no reveal, no confession, because identities were leverage and she did not offer hers. After the OR doors closed, adrenaline drained from the unit in a slow collapse, and Mara stood at the station staring at the torn tape roll in Aaron's hand like it was an artifact from another world. Then said in a low, heavy voice that Aaron saved her unit and destroyed her job, and Aaron answered without pride that maybe, but nobody died, and Mara said they would ask questions. And Aaron nodded that they could. Aaron returned to bed 8 where Ms. Alvarez lay frightened, her eyes searching Aaron's face for cues, and Aaron checked the line again, adjusted the pump, wiped sweat from the woman's forehead with a clean cloth, and when Ms. Alvarez asked if they were safe, Aaron paused because safety was never absolute, Not in hospitals, not in the world that had brushed against their doors, and Erin answered the only honest way. For now. Yes. She stayed until the woman's breathing eased, then stepped back into the hallway and dropped the torn tape backing into a trash, like it meant nothing, because she wanted no talismans of heroism. Only function. Across the hall, Mara watched Erin with a new expression, not admiration, not gratitude that demanded repayment, but the blunt respect of someone who had seen competence under pressure and understood the cost of it. Erin adjusted her badge, checked the board, and took the next call light as if the night had not nearly become a massacre, because in the end she did not want recognition. She wanted the unit to keep breathing, and she wanted the crisis to end the way it should in an ICU, quietly, heavily earned. With everyone alive, and the person who held the line returning to work without spotlight, letting the building believe it saved itself.